coming up on today's halftime broadcast.
She's developing herself. She's finding out who she is as an individual. She is getting rid of any baggage that could hinder her from having a successful relationship.
But you want somebody to be able to check you to say, hey, you know what, man? You just told me about the situation. I appreciate you telling me, but at the same time, you were wrong. You apologize to your wife.
What do you understand about marriage as a husband? What does she understand about marriage as a wife? What do you both understand about the different roles and responsibilities in marriage, the expectations?
No, it's the tissue. It's you left your shoe in the middle of the floor, and every other little thing that would have bothered you before is really irritating now.
The man that makes sure you're not leading anyone on. Make sure you choose to surround yourself with individuals who will challenge you and ask you to be a better man.
And now, today's Bible teaching with Tony Emahan, pastor of Braveheart United.
Top of the day to you, and thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast of Halftime. Those of you who tune in regularly, you already know. Go ahead and get your note-taking devices ready, because we're going to go both deeper and wider into the knowledge of God's Word today as we start this new series on marriage and relationships. We do this every year during the month of February, so watch out, because we're coming at you strong, trying to make marriages more healthy and help you strengthen exactly where you're at, recognizing where you're at now, but strengthening you so that you can endure the days to come. So today we embark upon this series entitled When the Vow Breaks. And I am so delighted to have with me Thomas and Tamika McTier. They're devoted marriage advocates. They're also certified SYMBIS facilitators. I'll let them explain that to you as we unpack this notion of where do we start. Thomas and Tamika, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tony, for inviting us on.
Listen, you all are being a blessing to me by coming on. Tell us, what does SYMBIS stand for?
SYMBIS stands for saving your marriage before it starts. And basically what that is we kind of take couples through, it can be a 4 to 6 week journey, and just kind of breaking down over the course of key areas that you'll focus on in marriage, whether it be communication, finances, some of your upbringing, expectations on what you might have as far as roles that your husband might take on in the household or what your wife might take on in the household. We kind of unpack a lot of that, and then just a lot of your upbringing and how that could impact your marriage for the good or the bad. Additionally, in this SYMBIS assessment that we do with couples, it kind of gives a little bit more about their personality, and if based on some of the questions that they ask, if it's even deemed that they should move forward in the marriage at that particular time, or if their additional counseling should take place before they get to the point where they say, I do. The unique thing about the SYMBIS assessment is, although it's titled Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts, it's also an effective tool that we have been able to use with couples that are already married. For example, if they didn't take premarital counseling or anything like that, there's still things that come up in the marriage within those first couple of years, or marriages that have even been around a long time, where we're able to help couples unpack things that maybe they have never had discussions on, and give them action plans to take back and implement each and every week during their time of meeting with us, and throughout those action steps that we provide them to see how they work, to see what they were able to implement, to see what change they were able to see in their spouse, or identify anything within themselves that they weren't aware of, and they're made aware of it at that time.
That's good.
I would almost say like it's a mini marriage boot camp, so to speak. When you look at couples getting together or thinking about marriage, you kind of unpack a lot of information, as Tamika already mentioned already. But it will just kind of get down to the nitty gritty. As it relates to finances, but it's really kind of a check and balances, so to speak, when you really get an opportunity to kind of sit down one-on-one with us or any SYMBIS facilitator from that standpoint, where you can actually kind of unpack a lot of this information. But it gives a good description of kind of, hey, I knew my couple kind of dealt with this way. These are the kind of the reasons why, because of things in their background and stuff like that comes up in the SYMBIS assessment once you actually take it and we actually go through it with couples.
So why is going through something like SYMBIS or a marriage boot camp or marriage preparation boot camp or even counseling, why is that so important to engage in before a man and a woman decides to move forward and take that next step of marriage?
I would say overall that, having a good foundation to start on, right? You want to have a good foundation. So I think being able to have an opportunity to kind of go through, premarital counseling, or whether it's kind of taking the SYMBIS assessment, you have an opportunity to kind of really unpack a lot of information and learn a little bit more about your spouse as it relates to why they behave a certain way. For people who have not, had an opportunity to kind of go through it or even go through premarital counseling, you learn a lot not only about your spouse, but you learn a lot about yourself and why you may deal with things a certain way. So I think it's very important for somebody to, for every couple to go through some type of premarital counseling, because it allows them to have a foundation and a starting block, and things that they may not actually tackle in their marriage at this moment, but it will be something that would eventually come up during their marriage that they can always go back to that foundation once they start it.
Additionally, I think premarital counseling or going through a SYMBIS or boot camp assessment prior to being married is effective and needed, especially for someone that grew up in a single-parent household. Coming from a single-parent household, and I can speak to that for myself, you don't get that example of what a marriage should look like. So if you are a man or a woman who's entering marriage, you may know, okay, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person, but having no mom and dad in the household, having no one in your family, not having that example and only having to look to the outside or, someone else for that marriage, I think this gives more of a foundation. Additionally, for couples that are trying to, lead a marriage according to what God would say a marriage should be, then it's definitely something that I think, that's going to strengthen your marriage. I think that we're all better when we're provided with the right tools to be successful. So to me, SYMBIS or getting premarital counseling, that's only setting you up for success, or even if you don't want to call it setting yourself up for success, that's one additional tool or multiple additional tools that you have to help you get to the next step, especially when you get counseling that's real and that's transparent and doesn't paint the picture that marriage is going to be roses every single day. When you're speaking with someone that can tell you, there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, but how you get through those, you don't just give up or anything like that. So I think there's many reasons why a couple should entertain and go through some type of premarital counseling prior to saying I do.
So let me ask you this, Tamika. How does a woman know if she's ready to be a wife? Does that come through counseling, or does that come through something in and of herself? How does she know?
I think a lot of women will say, that they want to get married because that's just the American way. It's you get married, you have children, you get the home and things like that. But truly, I believe a woman knows that she is ready to get married when she has truly submitted herself to God and really surrendered to Him and allow Him to order her steps in that area and send her spouse to her, not going out seeking and doing whatever it is that she feels to go and find this man, but this man is actually finding her. But ultimately what I say is that she's done the work on herself, that those are the desires of her heart, and she's trusting God that if that's His will, that He will meet her at that point. But she's developing herself. She's finding out who she is as an individual. She is getting rid of any baggage that could hinder her from having a successful relationship, whether it was any past hurt from a previous relationship, whether it's something that's happened in her childhood. She is understanding who she is and loving herself as an individual first, falling in love with herself first before she has any expectations of what a man should do and should provide to her. Like, she knows who she is 100%.
That's good. So those of you who are taking notes, let me go back and just kind of recap what you said. A woman knows that she's ready for marriage when, number one, she's submitted herself to God.
Yes.
And number two, she allows God to order her steps. That means she has faith in the process that God has put her through to prepare her for marriage. Okay?
Yes.
That's number two. Number three, she's worked on herself. And I love that because oftentimes, you know, women just kind of, and I won't say women, but as girls, you know, we look at what we see on TV, and there's always a wedding, and we're planning our wedding day from the time we turn 5 until the time we actually walk down the aisle. So I like the fact that you added in there that, you know, there is some work that we have to do on ourselves as women. And being aware that that does have to take place. We don't just wake up and get married one day. We don't just wake up and become marriage material, but I love that. Also, number 4, trusting God. Number 5, finding out who she is. Do you know who you are as a woman? Right? Who are you introducing that man to? And I think that is so key, because a lot of women, we get married and we expect somebody to love us and know us when we don't even know ourselves. Have you had that experience?
Definitely. And what I would say is, I think it's a common thing for women to, you know, want to get married and have these expectations of men. And unfortunately, sometimes the expectation that women hold on men isn't something that they are even putting back out there. So they have these high expectations, like he needs to have this or he should have this, and lo and behold, like they don't have any of those characteristics themselves. So it's like you're asking for something that you're not even willing to do, or you're asking for something that you don't even have or is willing to provide to that other person. So again, I just think it's very, very important to know who you are before entering a marriage and understanding what it is that makes you happy, because looking to your spouse to fulfill you in every way is not going to happen. So if it's a feeling that you're searching for, what happens when that feeling fades, when you feel like your spouse isn't giving you that high or that thing to make you happy anymore? Well, where is your happiness coming from? What is fulfilling you?
That's good, Tamika. That's really good. That's really good. And I'm going to add that down as number 6, understanding what makes you happy. And along with that is, just like you said, okay, if you put it all on your spouse's shoulders to carry, when you're not getting that feeling, then where are you getting that joy and that happiness from? So that's really good. Number 7 was ridding yourself of baggage, those past hurts. I would say, and add to that, come out of that moment, because oftentimes we get stuck in the moment of a hurt, and it cripples us. It paralyzes us in a place in our mind. And in the context of relationship, a lot of times we don't realize where that comes from. Why do we shut down in the communication when we're having a discussion with our spouse? Why do we shut down? Sometimes it's tied to a past hurt. And we no longer know how to communicate, and we're stuck in that moment from 15 years ago with Billy Bob. And so I think that's excellent there. And then number 8, loving yourself. Can we talk more about that? Because I always tell the women and just people in general that I have the opportunity to counsel is that if you don't love you, how can I love you? How can you expect someone else to love you if you don't love yourself? And it's kind of an oxymoronic state of mind, but it's such a common state of mind for a lot of people that they're not in love with themselves, but they suffer from the attributes or the consequence of what they would deem to be people not loving them, but yet they don't love themselves. And it's something very easy to see. So I'm going to take a pause here, and I'm going to direct this next segment toward the men, because men, we've talked about from a woman's perspective, how does she know if she's ready to get married? Now I want to talk and say, how do you know if she's ready to get married or if she's even marriage material? The first thing I'd share with you is that you have to determine whether or not she's compatible with you. And that compatibility comes from her ability to be teachable and adaptable. If she's selfish or self-centered, self-consumed, and know-it-all, then she's not going to be compatible for you from the start. So don't take this dysfunction of a person who's unteachable and inflexible into a relationship and think you're going to marry her and train her up to be something different. The other thing I'd say is you have to be able to assess and analyze whether or not she has the capacity for oneness. Is she capable of becoming one with you? Will you be a priority in her life? Will she have the same transparency with you that she has with her mother, that she has with her sister, that she has with her father? Will she or does she have the capacity for oneness? Something else I'd add there is, does she understand what honor and respect is? Does she honor and respect you now in your dating relationship? What is her concept of that? What is her understanding of that? How does she demonstrate that in your relationship now? And the last thing I'll add in that area is, how does she perceive her role and responsibility of completing you as a wife? We look to the book of Genesis where God looked upon man and said that man should not live alone, and he created a woman to add that completeness to his life. Okay? So how does she perceive her role and responsibility of adding that completeness? Those are some of the things that you as men need to look at when you're determining whether or not she's wifey material. And even if she's now your wife, you need to see how you all can sit down and talk about these things and bring better perspective. Get a counselor involved. Get a marriage facilitator involved. Someone to help you walk through these things. So with that said, I'm going to ask Thomas this question. How does a man know if he's ready to be a husband?
You know, it's interesting in society, they don't really, as you all mentioned, women are kind of taught from an early age from a standpoint that they're supposed to get married and have children and settle down, where in today's environment, basically men aren't really taught that to a degree. It is more of, you're supposed to live your life and, basically kind of, go through your options and then kind of decide if that's something you want to do. So I think a lot of men aren't really sure from a standpoint and don't really know if they're ready to be married. But I think it comes down to an overall mindset for a man and where he kind of sits and who he surrounds himself with. If you're hanging out with a bunch of people who are unmarried or people who are they still want to be out there playing the field and not really settle down, it's very difficult for that one person out of that group to kind of decide to settle down. So that man has to have a mindset that he wants to take this woman and marry her and have a family eventually, or just continue to be married. And so I think a man has to check his own self, where he stands in his life, and does that align with, who God has called him to be, and does he want to venture out and decide to be married? Because again, society doesn't tell a man he needs to be married. It tells him he needs to play the field. But his mindset needs to be aligned with God, and he also has to make sure that he surrounds himself with good godly men that will challenge him and keep him grounded in his faith and in his character. So I think it's very important. It is really a mindset, the way men have to, decide to be married, because, some people didn't grow up, with father. Some people didn't grow up in a stable household. do they have certain influences in their life that will allow to check them, that will allow to keep them on a very good path. So I do think that it's for a man, it's more of a mindset. He has to make sure that he get his, because most men will delay the process of trying to get married. Like, I'm not where I want to be yet, or I'm on a 5-year plan, or this, that, and the other. But if your mindset is, if she is everything that you want in a woman, why are you waiting? There is no point to wait if you feel that she is the one for you. But again, a lot of men are scared because the weight of marriage and the responsibility, and a lot of men don't want to be too vulnerable to a certain degree. But I think it takes a certain man's mindset to be vulnerable to the woman that he's with, that he's going to marry, and then also make sure that he continues to surround himself with good people that will continue to challenge him.
That's good. That's real good. I'm going to see if I can go back and digest what you said. And actually, there's one thing that I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned. You said something about how society does not necessarily condition our young boys, our men, to engage or enter into that realm of marriage. And most men will delay it and say something like they're finding a plan. And tell me a little bit about that, about a man, and when he says that I'm not ready to get married, or, I need to plan for that, what would that entail, or what should it entail? What does that look like?
I mean, I think a lot of men will equate that to, I want to be at a certain status before I decide to get married. And I think that is, from a financial standpoint, when they decide to get married, they feel like they're at this certain level. Well, if I can tell you from personal experience, if I was at that level when Tamika and I decided to get married, we wouldn't have gotten married at that time. But it was pretty much a mindset that Tamika was the one who I wanted to be with for the rest of my life, and if she's everything that I see her for her to be my wife, why am I still waiting? But I do think, as you mentioned, having a plan is important. I think if you can initially have analysis paralysis, if you decide to sit back and wait till everything is going to be perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. So you have to have faith that this is who you want to be with, and eventually you guys can create a plan together, because it's not you on the boat by yourself anymore once you get married. It's two of you in the boat together rowing the same way.
That's real good. Okay, so let me go back for those of you who are taking notes. A lot of wisdom nuggets being dropped here. So I hope you're able to catch it. And if you're not able to capture it now, do go back and listen to this and take the notes and hold yourself accountable to it. Whether you are dating and engaged now, contemplating marriage, preparing for marriage, or if you're already married, maybe there's some things in your marriage that you need to work on. And it doesn't matter if you're newly married or if you've been married 15, 20 years. We all have some things to work on, and it's never too late to bring your marriage in alignment with what God desires for you, so that you can experience those greater levels of joy and contentment and peace in your life. So just to go back and recap what Tommy had shared with us, is that he talked about a man who surrounds himself with men who honor the institution of marriage. Okay, marriage-mindedness. Number 2, the mindset is what determines whether or not a man is actually ready to be married. So men, ask yourself, is marriage really your mindset? Are you ready to take on a wife, and are you ready to start a family? In your mind, are you ready to commit to that? So when we talk about mindset, it's basically, are you ready to commit to that? Number 3, if my notes are right, you said he will check himself, and does his mindset align with God? Does his steps align with what God wants for his life? Number 4, that he has godly men that he surrounds himself with that will keep him accountable and also help to watch out and protect and grow with him in character. I put that surrounded by godly men, accountability, and character all in the same boat. Because when you do have godly men in your life as a man, it will help you to stay grounded. It will help you to keep your character intact. It will give you that godly counsel, access to godly counsel that you need from people that you trust. And the Bible talks about the good things that come out of a multitude of counsel. And so if from a lifestyle perspective as a single, you've surrounded yourself with godly men that are either marriage-minded or already husbands themselves, it can help you pull along the way to develop your mindset into something that God would want it to be as it relates to marriage. Okay, I think that was point number 4.
Can I actually add something else in there too?
Yeah.
And, as it relates to surrounding yourself with godly men or men who will challenge you, it's very important, because if you are hanging out with people who don't honor the institution of marriage, they don't care how you carry yourself at the end of the day. And so if you decide to, if you decide to step out or flirt with somebody or anything along those lines that you guys are hanging out, they're not going to check you that, hey, man, you need to get yourself in line. Or if you come to your friend with a problem that you may have, with your wife, and you're kind of venting, he was like, well, I don't know why you got married anyway. And so, you have a situation where basically, people become negative in that institution, but you want somebody to be able to check you to say, hey, you know what, man, you just told me about the situation. I appreciate you telling me, but at the same time, you were wrong. You need to apologize to your wife. You need people in your life who will be that honest with you, and not people who will just people who are yes men. You don't need people like that in your life. You need people who are willing to tell you when you are wrong.
That's good. I hope y'all are getting this. I hope you are getting this. So that would be number 6, men who will challenge you. And I think that is so critical. And even with wives, I have a group of married women that I meet with on a regular basis, and we challenge each other when we come in and we share our issues or our struggles with one another. And it's like, yeah, we're going to, rally around you and try and make you feel better, but you're going to own your stuff in this situation, and you're going to go get it right with your husband. And so, not just saying, oh, that's okay, he'll get over it. No, you need to do what you need to do to make sure he gets over it. Own your stuff, particularly if you've been acting in a self-centered, self-righteous manner as it relates to your marriage and your relationship. So number 6 is surrounding yourself with men who challenge you, having that arsenal of men around you who challenge you. I'm sorry, that was number 5. Number 6 was getting to a point where you can be vulnerable to your wife. And then number 7, I recorded that as dealing with the plan, basically having a financial plan, being financially set, and being able to take care of what it is that you're aspiring to do in that taking on a wife and in that context of starting a family. So for this moment, I'm going to talk to the women about how you will know whether or not that man that you're spending all of that time with, hoping that he will marry you, whether or not he's really marriage material. The first thing I'd say to you is to assess, how is he living? Is he living by a budget? Does he even know what a budget is? Or is he financially irresponsible? Because if he's financially irresponsible in his own singleness, in his single life, then he's definitely going to be financially irresponsible in your marriage life. Does he have a job? Does he have a bank account? Does he have insurance? Does he have health insurance? Does he take his health for granted, does he have a medical insurance policy? Because if he's not insuring himself from a medical standpoint, he's certainly not going to see the importance of insuring you. So when Thomas was just talking about having a plan, a man who's ready for marriage, all of these things are going through his mind, and he's not going to, hopefully, a mature man, someone who has matriculated from being a boy to actually being a man and having a proper mindset, he's not going to want to bring anyone else into his position or his state of lack. So a lot of times, if a man is telling you, I am not ready to get married, I don't have my stuff together, believe him. Believe him. Because he probably does not have these things in place. And while you're over here floating on the fumes of, I love him, what he's telling you is that I can't adequately take care of you, and I'm not going to put myself in that position because it would not be good for him from a mental standpoint, and it would not be good for you either, and it certainly would not be good for the marriage, the strength of the marriage. So the next thing I'd add is listen to what he's saying. Again, if he says, I'm not ready, that might be all you need to know to pick up you put your shoes on and keep walking. Okay? If he says that I'm not ready, he may not be ready because he's not finished sowing his wild oats out there. He's not finished exploring. He may not feel that he's capable right now of taking care of the family. He may need to work some on himself. He could have some self-esteem issues. It could be any number of things. But when he says, I am not ready, hear him, believe him, and make your next best steps without him until he gets ready. And if you are available, come back to the relationship if you still feel the same way. If not, pray that God sends you the right one. Okay? Next thing I'd add is, does he behold you as God does? Does he see you as God does? Will he love you as God does? Is he in tune to your needs? Or is he only in tune to his needs? You know, my husband and I, we were doing this devotional, and we were reading on the concept of love tanks and love banks. I know that the two of you have to be familiar with that, you know, filling the love bank, the emotional tank. Can you share some about the responsibility or how effective or ineffective that can be in a marriage?
Yes. I would say it's very effective in a marriage when you are tapping into your spouse's love tank. And obviously, if you aren't tapping into your spouse's love tank, then it could definitely have a negative impact on your marriage. And most of the time, in most marriages, you and your spouse will have a different what fills up your love tank is 9 times out of 10 going to be different. While you guys may have some similarities and cross along the same lines from point to point, your love language is typically different. And so for myself and Tommy, one of his is physical touch, and that's not a big deal to me. And it took me a while to understand that that's what he wanted, because I think one of the natural things with understanding the love language and being able to give it to your spouse, I think it's a natural thing for us to give our spouse what our love language is instead of feeding into what our spouse's love language is. And so at times, I think if you don't have a clear understanding of it, you will be giving your spouse everything that you want, and in return, you're thinking that you're filling them up and doing things to please them and to love on them, when in reality, your spouse is feeling empty because they're feeling as if you aren't doing those things. However, when you know what it is and when you're intentional about it, it's only going to raise your marriage and your connection with your spouse to an entire new level. I would say in those instances when you and your spouse have a different love language, the more intentional you are about it, the more second nature it will become to you. Like when you become a creature, make it so that you become a creature of habit of that thing, filling your spouse up, and it's like, well, I filled my spouse up, and now my spouse is filling me up. Oh, so not that you're in competition with your spouse, but it creates like this little love cycle for you. Like, they did this for me, so I'm doing this for them, and you're not doing it because you want a reward in the end, but it's keeping that love tank overflowing.
And that's good. I think it's definitely needed, and the reason why is because when that love tank is full, small disagreements don't appear to be as big,
right?
And they don't matter as much because your tank is full and it's not taking everything out of you. So there's a difference when both of you are running around in the negative and there's a deficit. So now, if somebody puts the tissue roll on the on the little hanger thing, the wrong direction, it makes all the difference in the world when you see that as to where your love tank is.
It makes all the difference. All the little vices and the things that you thought you were like, oh, it's just tissue. Like, no, it's the tissue. Is you left your shoe in the middle of the floor, and every other little thing that would have bothered me before is really irritating now because you're empty. And so believe it or not, then it could become a trickle effect. Communication, it could start a communication breakdown, and one thing could lead to another, and communication could stop, and then intimacy could stop in the bedroom. And so it's a building block. I think it's very important for couples to become vulnerable with one another, know what it is that fills your spouse up, find out what their love language is, and in the event where it seems to be a disconnect, it's easier to address it sooner rather than later. And I know that can be easier said than done, but it really is better to address it sooner than later because you can find yourself days has gone by, weeks has gone by, months has gone by, and before you know it, a true disconnect could have taken place in a marriage. And I believe that's when you hear couples say, I don't know what happened, we just grew apart because of that small vice and that thing that you didn't address continued to build. And one little thing that could have been addressed and discussed and point of views could have been shared turn into resentment, animosity towards the other one, and now it's just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it becomes one of those situations where those little vices is basically like adding logs. Basically, you're adding logs. All those little vices that aren't going said, adding logs, and all of a sudden, when those logs become to a certain point, a match is lit, and what happens to the logs? They all burn on fire, and then everybody's in trouble at that point. Because nothing was ever addressed. Now the house is on fire because you never addressed those small situations. As opposed to if you put a log down and you address it, and when you're taking the log away, there's less room for a fire.
That's good stuff. Seems like we just got started with this conversation, but we're all out of time. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so the last thing that I'd add as we wrap this up is just saying that if you are contemplating marriage, and even if you are in a marriage that could be going through some troubled waters, it may be worth spending some time just finding out what each other's concept of marriage is and defining that. What do you understand about marriage as a husband? What does she understand about marriage as a wife? What do you both understand about the different roles and responsibilities in marriage? The expectations. Are there expectations that are unrealistic? Do you have unrealistic expectations of your spouse or your spouse to be? And just exactly laying out what those deal breakers are with regard to expectations. And I think ever so often, because even in a couple that's been married for 30 years, expectations change over time. So that's why being able to go to marriage facilitators, counselors, people that can sit down with you and just do a marriage checkup is critical to the health and well-being of your marriage. Nourish your marriage in that way. So before we close out, Thomas and Tamika, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to get you involved as a marriage facilitator in their marriage, to help them go through some of these assessments to see where they are now, either in a dated and engaged relationship or in a tenured married relationship where they just need to kind of go up under the hood and check things out and do a marriage checkup?
Yeah, so if couples would like to get in touch with us further, or if you wanted to work with us on an individual basis, we can be reached at McTier1, that's MCTIER, 1, at iCloud.com. And I also do individual sessions with wives or those that are contemplating marriage and just want to do some work on herself prior to being married. And I can be reached at www.Tamika McTier, that's Tamika, last name McTier, MCTIER.com. Any inquiries can be sent there or, again, at the email that was mentioned to you previously.
Very good, very good. So before we close out, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I would say to all the guys, or to all the women out there who are listening from a standpoint of, where guys stand, and all the guys who are listening out there from a standpoint of just make sure you're both being honest with one another, and make sure that you as a man, that make sure you're not leading anyone on. Make sure you choose to surround yourself with individuals who will challenge you and ask you to be a better man. And make sure that you continue to develop the mindset that you want to make sure that you want to get better each and every day and draw closer to the Lord, because that's when you truly have a plan for your life.
Amen.
And as far as the women, I would say be open, be honest. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, know who you are, love yourself first. Allow yourself to just surrender to God and have Him to help you become the woman that you need to be as He finds the husband and sends him to you. Additionally, what I would say to both men and women, because we've seen this so many times, and it's something that I didn't want to miss, and I wanted to make sure I made mention of it. Be honest about your future plans for a family. If you know deep down in your heart that having a family is not something that you want, and women, if you know something that having children one day is something that you do want, communicate that to him. If he says, I don't want children, he's probably telling the truth. Don't think that because you said I do and he says, I don't want children, that because you said I do, that's going to change. We've seen too many marriages struggle and end because of this one thing. Well, I thought that he would change his mind, or I told her that I wanted 4 kids and now she only wants 1. And additionally, the last thing I would say on top of that, for those of you that have children or plan on having children, it is so important to establish a relationship with your spouse outside of your children. Make your spouse just as important as your child. The number 18 will come. That's the age that most kids either go off to college, move out the house, or whatever the case may be, but don't spend your entire marriage focused and building your marriage around your children. Your children are being born into what you have going on. So adapt their world around what you guys already have going on. Incorporate them into your life. Your life shouldn't be dictated by a newborn, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, or whatever age your child is. Make sure you uphold your marriage.
Make sure your marriage comes
first.
Don't let
your children rule it.
That's so good. What were you saying, Thomas?
I said just make sure your marriage comes first. When we went through premarital counseling, that's the one thing, the pastor told us, is that your marriage comes first and your kids come after that. And because if you don't tend to your marriage, your kids won't have parents who are together because you're too busy focused on everything else beside your marriage.
And it's so true, because there's a proper alignment when it comes to family. And the husband has his priority, the wife has her priority, and that does not begin with children. So right. I am not surprised by the number of couples that are going through challenges because one or the other spouse has put the children first before their relationship with their spouse. So everything you're saying with regard to that, I've seen to be so true. And particularly when I start, talking to wives and counseling them on the proper order of family. God first, then your husband, and then your children. They are baffled because when they had that baby and that baby was put in their arms, it did something to them, as it should, but it should never do so much to you that it overpowers your husband's position in your life. So with that said, Thomas and Tamika, I thank you so much for joining me in this discussion, in this relationship series on marriage. And I look forward to having the two of you on the show again.
Thank you so much, Tony, for inviting us on, and extend the invite whenever you want to have us back.
I definitely appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. And to you all, on next week, tune in again, same time, same place. Until then,
you are listening
top of the day
to
you.
Halftime with Tony Imahel, pastor of Brave Heart United.
Hi, this is Tony Imahel, and today I want to talk to you about how marriage is like a wellspring. I can remember when I was a child, I used to go out to pump water at the well with my father. Since I was the youngest of 10 children, I wasn't allowed to go out to the pump by myself. However, whenever he would go out, I would go with him, and he would be going to pump water to bring it back in to supply the family's needs. I would observe him very carefully hand pour a bit of water into the well to get the circulation going. Then he would hold on to the handle and begin priming the pump until water began to flow rapidly from the well. Next, he would slow his pump down just a bit to a gradual flow, to a gradual pace, to keep the water flowing at a desired consistency and at a desired rate. When I think about the times with my father there at that well, I think about how much that process is like keeping one's marriage afloat. Think about it. When a man enters marriage with something of need placed in his hands by God to give to his wife, desire, words of life, care, concern, time, love, affection, intimacy, tenderness, touch, kindness, trust, security, safety, refuge, and the list goes on and on and on. When he pours these things into her, she ceases her existence as a fixture in his life and becomes a wellspring of nourishment, healing balm, a preservative, just what he needs to become and accomplish all that God desires of him in his lifetime. Like my father at the well, once the water began to flow, he didn't stop what he was doing to invoke the flow in the first place. Rather, he kept his hand on it. Okay? He remained present. He kept stroking the pump at a consistent pace to keep the water flowing. In response, the well kept providing a refreshing stream of water for him and the family to drink, to cook with, to bathe with, to brush our teeth with, to survive with. Water that flowed from that well gave us life. And that's what a wife does in a marriage. Man primes the pump. The woman is the well from which the water flows to continue to give the marriage life based on what he is pouring into it, and that extends to the family. My question to you husbands on today is, do you still have your hand on the pump? Luke chapter 3 verse 38 reminds us, give and it shall be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with good measure you use, it will be measured to you. If you are not getting a consistent, healthy, and refreshing flow of life out of your marriage today, earnestly consider what you're giving into it. You've already put in the initial deposit as a husband, and as a wife, you have already began pouring out. Both of you, consider your ways and make the necessary adjustments to bring increased levels of consistency and compatibility so that God can bless it with the good measure that He desires for you.
Today's broadcast has been brought to you by Next Level Plus Project Management and Business Consultants. Learn more about how Next Level Plus can help you solve the right problems and seize the right opportunities by calling 704-780-2997 or visit their website at nextlevelplus.org.